Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. To all the members of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel, I welcome you to our meeting of the 14th of March 2023. The meeting is now going to begin. I'd also like to welcome the gentlemen John and Tim. I hope you don't mind me using your Christian names. John and Tim, who are here representing Southern Water. One of the items on the agenda a little bit later, we'll be hearing from them. To the officers of the council who are supporting us as always in the preparation of this meeting, and I know in particular there's been quite a lot of background work that's had to go on to produce this meeting, so thank you for that. And also, of course, to members of the public as well as other councillors from the district who are joining us. May I welcome you to this meeting, and we hope that for you it is a positive experience in seeing your council at work and in seeing a response from a body from outside of this council who have been invited to come and talk to us. And I use the word invited quite strongly because it is an invitation. So I would respectfully ask everybody to remember that. Although the council has the right to ask outside organisations to come in, particularly in areas that affect, I shouldn't use the word areas twice, matters that affect the area, it is always an invitation. So personally, thank you very much for coming once more to be able to speak with us this evening. Moving on then to the fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate the offices down the main staircase opposite the lifts in the foyer, and we'll assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist us when it's deemed advisable to return. Would everyone present please ensure their mobile phones are turned to silent or flight mode or something like that, so they are not used to receive or make phone calls, text messages, and so on, other ways of disturbing the meeting. This meeting is being live streamed for members of the public to observe as well, and it will be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone here intend to film the meeting? No, I'm not seeing any signs of that. During the course of the evening, speaking under Council Rule 20.1 are the following members of the Council. Item number 4, the Southern Water presentation, Councillor Garner, Councillor Bailey, and Councillor Rolfe. Is that correct, Councillor Rolfe? Are there any other councillors with us who may wish to speak? No. Okay. Public speaking, I've received the following requests for public speaking. On agenda item 4, first then, the Southern Water presentation, Ms. Elizabeth Wickenden and Ms. Jackie Brown. And Jackie Brown, it says here, is representing Westgate and Garlinge Action Group against housing development on farmland. On agenda item 5, the Collaboration Working Party report, we have Councillor Hudson, Chair of Birchington Parish Council. Is Councillor Hudson with us?
Yeah, he is.
Welcome to you. We will come to you for that item as well. So the agenda items, substantive items on the agenda then, apologies for absence. I have received apologies for the following members. Councillor Lees is substituted by Councillor Rozecki. Councillor Wing is substituted by Councillor Smith. Councillor Patmore is substituted by Councillor Yates. And Councillor Rattigan is substituted by Councillor Towning. Thank you very much for coming and joining the meeting this evening. Are there any declarations of interest that members need to make? No. Agenda item number 3 then, to approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting held on the 16th of February 2023. There is a copy attached to the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer, please, for those minutes? Thank you very much. And can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Austin. Do members agree? Thank you very much. And so we move to item number 4 on our agenda, the Southern Water presentation. And under our public speaking facilities, I would now like to invite Ms. Wickenden to come to a microphone and address the meeting. Ms. Wickenden.
Good evening, my name is Elizabeth Wickenden. I am a resident of the Wimpy Estate in Broadstairs, which is situated very close to the Romfields Road power station, which obviously has had a lot of incidents recently. My question to Southern Water is, for the December 2022 water outages across Thanet, why have you as a company, Southern Water, been so sporadic in how compensation or goodwill payments have been credited to customers' accounts? And why are there differences in payment amounts? And finally, why are there still a high number of Wimpy Estate customers who are still waiting for their compensation money to be credited to their accounts? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wickenden. We will be listening very carefully when the presentation comes, and we hope that that question will be addressed during the presentation. Thank you very much indeed. And now then, Ms. Jackie Brown, please, to ask a question.
Good evening, I'm Jackie Brown and I'm representing the Westgate and Guardians Action Group against housing development on farmland. And I'd like to ask Southern Water, if developments of 21,000 houses across Thanet receive planning permission, are Southern Water able to give residents assurances that they will be able to deliver a reliable water supply and that sewage spillages into the sea will not increase? Given that the area already experiences this and there will be no negative impacts on communities across the district from water supply and sewage treatment and disposal issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being willing to come and talk to the panel. Again, we'll make sure, we'll listen very carefully to ensure that that is addressed during the course of the presentation. Speaking under Rule 20.1 in the Council then, first of all, can I ask Councillor Garner, could you address the panel?
Thank you. Thank you. Hello. I'm pleased to have this opportunity to speak as one of the St Peter's Ward councillors, which covers the Wimpy Estate in Broadstairs, and I'm going to be speaking on both the subject areas highlighted within the committee report. That's the outages in December and January and your long-term infrastructure plan. So regarding the outages in December and January, well, you've heard from one resident from the Wimpy Estate who asked about compensation payments. I've been contacted by a number of other residents on the Wimpy Estate and the surrounding area of Broadstairs since last December about these and other outages. These residents, and I will declare an interest here, I'm one of them, bear the brunt of any outages at the Runfield Road site, both through the resulting lack of water and then through traffic impacts caused by road closures in the vicinity. A large number who contact me haven't received any compensation since the outages last December, despite a few being in regular contact, either by phone or email. One of them, whose name and contact details I can provide separately, asked me to read this out. The service Southern Water has provided since December last year has been appalling. The 4 water outages have affected myself and my family greatly, especially the ones that occurred on the 19th and 20th of December. On the 19th of December, I had to attend hospital for 2 procedures prior to surgery for breast cancer on the 20th of December. Not only could I not have a decent basic wash before the procedures on the 19th, I couldn't have a bath or shower before my surgery on the 20th. Due to these circumstances, I was unable to drive during this time, so getting to a water station after a very long day at the hospital was absolutely horrendous. The queues for water were extremely lengthy. I had to get a lift from a friend and bring my son as I was unable to lift anything. Thus far, I have received no compensation whatsoever for Southern Water and have had to chase it. The whole situation is totally unacceptable, and I did check with this lady yesterday and she hasn't received any compensation as yet. The majority of residents in Broadstairs have been impacted by these outages, especially the one on the 19th and 20th of December, which you acknowledged on your website as it was happening, lasted over 24 hours. So why haven't you automatically made a payment of £60 to all of these residents? This would then have enabled your customer service staff to deal with residents with additional needs and requirements. So next, your long-term infrastructure development plan. We all know, as it stands, Southern Water's water supply and treatment infrastructure is not fit for purpose. If it were, we would not have had frequent water outages over the last few months, and you would not be regularly pumping sewage off our coastline, as has been happening and not improving for a number of years now. As reported by SOS Whitstable just this week, in the 167 hours that elapsed between episode 1 and episode 2 of Paul Whitehouse's Our Troubled Rivers series, you released 931 hours worth of sewage into the waterways across the southeast. This is completely unacceptable. At a public meeting in Ramsgate a year ago, your previous CEO, Ian Macaulay, talked to us about upgrades planned to the infrastructure to improve matters. As far as most of us are concerned, nothing has improved. I believe, in fact, that things are worsening. As a council, there is little we can do to regulate how you manage your water supply and treatment infrastructure. That's the job of Ofwat, the Environment Agency and our government, all of whom continue to fail abjectly in their responsibilities. What I believe we could do as a council, though, is to stop making the situation worse by continuing to give permission for new large housing developments until you can convince us that your infrastructure is fit for purpose. And by that I mean by providing us a reliable water supply and no more sewage in the sea. So I look forward to seeing your long-term infrastructure development plan presentation to the panel and hearing how and when the work required will be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Garner. There is no, I'll just say there is no official time limit for comments speaking under Rule 20.1. I've tried to be as generous as I can, but could I ask you just to bear in mind how long the questioners, how long you're going to take to make your points. Thank you for that, very thorough. I know it's affected your ward particularly, and also that's the case with Councillor Bailey, please.
Thank you. Good evening. I just really have a list of bullet point of questions. I'm speaking on behalf of my residents in my ward, which is Viking Ward, which is also severely impacted by the recent spate of water outages. There's been a great deal of anger and frustration regarding both the repeated loss of water supply and the inconsistencies and delays around compensation. So my bullet points really is, one is communication. I think it's very patchy in two respects. During each of these recent outages, there's been very little information on the website or social media pages of Southern Water, and we've had to chase information and actually report these outages ourselves in a lot of cases. The most important thing people want to know is how long they're likely to be without water, and can there not be a quicker mechanism for alerting customers to problems. The second point about communication is that customers have tried using multiple platforms for contacting Southern Water with incredibly varying outcomes. Southern Water seems to be putting the onus on individual customers to prove how long they were without water, but surely Southern Water must have a mechanism for knowing who has lost water and for how long. My next point is about the bottled water. During the prolonged outage in December, the delivery of water bottles to priority customers was very patchy, with many not receiving them at all. And the second point, there was initially one water station set up at Dame Park School and then another at Asda, which was quickly changed to St George's. But all three locations were in an extremely small, busy area within a stone's throw of each other. And in future, if it ever happened again, it would be better to separate these sites to reduce the impact on local traffic. The next point really has been covered about compensation. There seems to be absolutely no consistency with payments. Southern Water must have known during the prolonged outage in December that it lasted more than 24 hours and for many more than 36 hours, yet the initial payments, if people received them, did not reflect this. Some accounts were automatically credited, yet some people, unbelievably still now, 3 months later, still haven't received any compensation. And while some people haven't received any, others have received payments varying between £30 and £200. And it's even reported that some people received compensation even though they didn't lose water. I also don't know, I've not heard anything about business compensation. It's inconvenient enough for households to lose water, but it's even worse for businesses. So they're trying to, especially in this climate, have they been adequately compensated? I did suggest in a tweet to Southern Water that in addition to the services standards of £30 per hour compensation, you maybe also need to make compensation payments for multiple outages within a certain time frame, because residents really need to rely on a consistent service. And finally, how can residents have any faith in a regular water supply going forward, especially with the thousands of new homes planned in Thanet? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Rolfe, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone, and thank you to those councillors that invited Southern Water to this meeting to give this opportunity to everyone to express their feeling and also ask their questions. I have asked some local farmers, and many residents in Thanet has told me farmers used to take seaweed, use them, and this is on their cost for free. This year alone, Thanet District Council had to put £20,000 on a site to clear the seaweed on the coast in Thanet. And the farmers cannot use these because it's been contaminated by human waste. Taxpayers should not pay for the mess if Southern Water cannot cope with the human waste and sewage. Can you please tell us what measure in place to taxpayers' money not to be waste of cleaning after the sewage that's been put in the sea, and also will you be happy to cover the cost if this has happened in the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rolfe. Thank you for all the questions from the public and from the councillors. I'm sure our guests have been listening very carefully and will try and cover as many of the points as they can. I'd now like to welcome Mr. Tim McMahon formally and Mr. John Mealy formally, who are going to come and make their presentation dealing with some of the issues that have been raised and perhaps other issues that we may not be aware of in terms of infrastructure issues, but to give us as full a briefing as they possibly can at this time. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much for hearing us today. If I can introduce myself again, I'm Tim McMahon and I'm the Water Operations Director for Southern Water. So my responsibility is extracting water from our rivers or underground all the way through to customers for our water assets, so our drinking water. But obviously I'm here as a spokesperson for Southern Water today, so I will try and answer some of the other broader questions around wastewater as we go. So in terms of the presentation today, I want to use this time to talk through the supply impact the customers at Broadstairs, Ramsgate, Manston and Margate experienced over the last few months. This was initially due to a burst water main, and I'll go into a bit more detail what that means in a second, followed by a number of power failures on our site, which I'll explain in a bit more detail. So the purpose of the slides is to give you an overview of what happened and how we're resolving it, or how we've resolved it. And I will look to answer some of the questions that have been just relayed to myself. But I would like to apologise in a first instance for the impact that our customers have seen. The multiple supply interruptions seen by customers is not acceptable. It's been lots of challenges around it, all for the right intentions, which I'll take you through in a minute, in terms of making that area more resilient, and through the investment that we've been putting in train. But we should have been better at stopping it from happening in the first place. So I would like to apologise for the impact customers have seen in these instances. So just in terms of context, how this network works, so it's quite a complicated area in how we've been having to operate it in the last few months. But in summary, the purple circle illustrates the customers that have been impacted through the recent events, and that accounts to just over 13,300 properties. That's the light blue section indicated by the purple section. There is a customer base to the north, which is about 7,000 properties, but we're lucky in that area that has two feeds, one from the tower, which you saw on the previous page, but also one from a booster station called Margate Booster Station, which means we can Margate Booster Station, sorry. So which means we can supply the customers from two sources. So if you lose the tower or lose the supply that feeds the tower, we have an option to cover that customer base with a different water supply. So the customers impacted are those in the purple circle, and that customer base is usually supplied by the tower, and that tower is really important because that's a reservoir with drinkable water in, which can hold water for up to 6 hours. So if we have a problem with the pumps that feed that tower, we have 6 hours to respond. Okay? We, over the last 6 months, have spent £1 million on that tower to upgrade it, i.e. extend its asset life, because there were problems with the civil infrastructure and it had leaks within it. So we had to fix that to extend its life and use that as a really important source for resilient supply for customers. So that meant, on point 4, the tower out of supply, that 13,300 customers were supported by 2 pumps, so a pumping station, which isn't out of practice. That happens a lot across the water industry, but it was a different supply approach to what we would normally have in place. And that means the second those pumps were to fail, or the pipe would fail associated to those pumps, you'd see an automatic customer impact, immediate customer impact, as opposed to the normal 6-hour response that we can have. So that's important context as to why we would have seen some of those impacts, which shouldn't have happened. But if the tower was in supply, only one of the instances that we've seen would have actually have caused a customer interruption. So it's important context. That tower is a very important asset for the resilience of that customer area. So in just a bit of detail then, some of the incidents that we've seen. So on the 19th of December, we had a burst water pipe when temperatures were very cold, if you remember, mid-December, then got very warm suddenly, and we saw that pipe burst at the actual tower itself, just beyond the pumps, beyond the boosters. We're still trying to understand and investigate the root cause for that through various investigations we're doing, but it looks like that was due to something called stress loading, which is where there's lots and lots of reasons why a pipe will burst, but it basically means there was something sitting on that pipe when it was installed 70, 80 years ago, which has caused strain on that pipe and for it to fail. But that meant 9,000 properties were out of water for more than 33 hours. And again, I'll give you a bit more of a breakdown on that in a second. Then on the 12th and 15th of January, we saw local outages in that area, which was causing our boosters to pump. So different power fluctuations in the network, which was causing these pumps to trip, which saw 2 interruptions for about an hour each time. And then on the 21st of January, we had a mains power failure at 7 p.m, which meant so a pumping station is fed through 2 sources. You have mains power from the grid, but if that were to fail, you have a generator which can kick in to supply the pumps with power. That generator was tested a week before, but the starter motor, which kicks in when the power failed, didn't come in, and that generator failed. So that meant just over 4,000 properties were left without water for 11 hours. So that generator should have worked, and it didn't in that instance. Off the back of that, we did quite a lot of activity to improve the the sort of the inlets to the pumps, the power, the support for those pumps, and started to man the site 24/7 to ensure that we had the right response. As part of the 30th of January, in terms of looking at getting that tower back in and get water into it to test if it had leaks in it or not, there was a short outage of 30 minutes, which was part of the maintenance work we were doing to get water into the asset base. And on the 23rd of February, the pumps failed again because of a fluctuation in power, but because it was a 24/7 man site, we were able to get that supply back up and running within 30 minutes as opposed to having to wait, 45 minutes as opposed to having to wait for individuals to attend site. Okay, so that gives you a bit of a rundown of what has happened and the frequency of events. So what have we done in the short term? So we've completed various electrical maintenance works in January to understand and improve the use of the generator. So we changed our generator, changed the motors of another generator to ensure that that was available in case there was a power failure. We've manned the site 24/7, and that's continued to be so. And then during the power outages, we've had the ability to switch over to that generator if needed. And as of yesterday, the tower is now back in supply after that £1 million investment, which is great news because that means we have a 6-hour contingency before we'd see customer interruption compared to how it's been operating over the last 6 months. Longer term, that pumping station element of the tower still needs to be made more resilient. So there's various works we need to do on that site around the control system and the starter motors and the power connectors to that site. And that's going to cost about £250,000. We're investing in that, and that will take about 6 months. Predominantly, the time is predominantly due to lead time for some of these kit connectors, with the sort of worldwide shortage of microchips at the moment, and that sort of equipment that's needed is proving it's got quite a long lead time. But we're very much committed to that investment and making that pumping station more resilient. As I say, with the tower in, that's a good thing, it improves resilience, but we want to make sure that there isn't any issues with this particular asset going forward. And then over the next year, we're forming what we call our final determination with our economic regulator, Ofwat, to form our plan from 2025 to 2030, which is setting our plans in place for this area and the wider Southern Water area. And that includes things such as what are we doing around long-term climate change, so water recycling, potentially desalination plants if required, all the way through to reducing leakage by a further 15% by 2030, and a significant mains replacement programme in that space. It's still very early stage. I can give you the detail of particular locations where we are looking to do work, but I think it's important to note that has to go through a lot of regulatory scrutiny before that can be confirmed in writing as to what we'll be doing for this area and the wider Southern Water area. In terms of how we compensate customers, so in the water industry we follow something called the Guaranteed Standard Scheme. So this is a regulatory condition set by Ofwat, which means for every 12 hours that customers are impacted, we have to pay them £30 for households, and for non-households, that's fish chops all the way through to factories, it's £75. And we have to proactively identify those customers and recompense them through reducing their bills or putting money into their account. We do that. It's quite a complicated process, but if you imagine if you remember on the first page, that light blue section, there was squares. Those squares are something called DMA, so district metered areas, and of our area we have about 1,600 of these DMAs, and each of these district metered areas have a flow probe and pressure probe that feeds the area called a district meter, and at the high point a pressure logger. And what we do from that is understand those data points and look at the bands of households in the DMA and run some hydraulics to understand who would be in and out of supply. Because as you can imagine, some will be cut off earlier than others because of the topography that we're looking at, and some will return quicker than others depending on the network and the topography that we look at. So we go through a process where That's checked by an operative who's been doing it for a long time, through the sort of a data set that we've used for about 5 years, and we then manually check that again through, we assure that with a separate individual, and then that's checked by management before we then submit that to our customer service team, who relays that to our customers by compensating them. And in terms of the who was impacted and the sort of the total compensation paid in December, it impacted a total of 13,395 customers in total. So 12,000 household, or just over 12,000 household, just over 1,000 non-household, for a duration of up to 24 hours. And the GSS payments were made for 9,696 households and 1,043 non-households within a 20-day deadline, and that was paid by the 20th of January. Unfortunately, 2,656 household customers were paid late, and an additional payment was made of £20. That was a processing error on our part, which we shouldn't have made. So I have to hold our hands up for that. That is a failing on our part, but we found it through obviously some of the complaints we're getting, and obviously recompensed customers and paid an extra £20. Household customers have obviously received letters to denote them of that information of that payment, and obviously with the non-household customers, we have to inform the retailer of the payment so they can credit the customer's account. I mean, in terms of what else we've been doing around customers, we note that there's obviously a lot of customer concern around the water supply in the area. And as of this afternoon, we actually came away from a session where we've been meeting customers to talk to them, to listen, to apologise, and also give them some assurances of the work we've been doing and understand any wider concerns they've got around southern water. Okay. So that's sort of the slides. If I can just, if I may, Chairman, address some of the questions that we heard. So in terms of the particular estate in question, I would have to take that away and confirm as to, and look at the data to understand why they may or may not have been missed and feed that back to the team. I think it's important we note that the process, if we have missed customers with our data set, the process we're following at the moment is if a customer contacts us and believe they haven't been recompensed with the right amount, or we've got the data wrong, we are looking at it on a case-by-case basis and recompensing the customer accordingly. But I will take the Wimpy Estate customers away to speak to the team as to why that's not happened. And clearly, if we have missed them, we will look to recompense those customers. I think, if I may, I'll come to the development side at the end, if I can just finish around the Rumsfield area. Then in terms of the outages and again, it comes a long-term plan. There's a question around communications and our website and pages. This is an area we are continuously trying to improve within Southern Water. We do a lot now on text messaging. We did a lot on radio to try and keep customers informed, and our website. We've since then improved our website further, so that's something that we do look to improve. We are seeing information coming back from some customers from surveys we have after these bigger events that is getting better, but it's a journey that we're on, and something we are continuously looking to improve, and we are looking to get our website better in terms of getting more information available. It definitely needs to improve in that space. In terms of bottled water, the 2 stations, we're currently looking with our local resilience forums to look at where we can better install bottled water at high-risk locations, this being obviously one of them due to the volume of impacts and the volume of events we've had historically. The real challenge we have in this space is getting suitable locations. They need to be big, so you get the right ingress and egress for vehicles. They need to have good traffic management facilities, and we've got to be able to get onto them, either they're not being used for something else, and this area is quite challenging for that. So working with the local resilience forums to identify other ones we will continue to do, but we are inhibited by scale and size for bottled water stations. Again, it's something we are trying to improve on an event by basis. That has got better for context, in terms of the last big event pre this event, in terms of the Isle of Sheppey, we were able to distribute 4 times more bottled water than what we did in that event. And then in terms of our vulnerable customers, we believe we responded and got bottled water, distributed bottled water to all of our customers within 12 hours. We are aware that from the local resilience forums, there was about 130 that were flagged in that day that we added to our list throughout that day and then got bottled water to them. But it's a challenge around, we have a list, that list needs to get updated live as the events go on, because obviously not everyone will inform us of them being a vulnerable customer, so we try and refresh that list as the event goes on. There's a question around non-household compensation, I think, which hopefully I covered. And then onto the development questions. So the first one is around the volume of houses being looked at within this area. So in terms of the water companies, we have a statutory duty to ensure developments proceed. We do not have the ability to reject development. Okay? So we cannot force people to not develop. What we should do, though, and what we need to do, and what we do try to do, is to work with the local planning authorities to identify where our constraints are, so that can be put into their conditions as part of the development. But we cannot say, as a developer comes up and says we're going to do A, B, C, we cannot go, well, no, we can't do that because of A, B, C. We have the duty, the statutory duty, to support that, but we have to try to achieve that in that process. Clearly, in terms of areas where we need to improve as an industry, is we welcome things such as the new SUDS policy that's coming out from government, where they're actively encouraging and driving developers to install SUDS. So we're very supportive of that. We want to ensure developers are driving water neutrality, so reducing usage for usage across the estate and their development, and looking at other areas such as on white goods, installing water neutrality elements to it, or reducing water use within those white goods. But as I say, we cannot stop development. We can help influence it by getting early in the process with local planning authorities who can then impose conditions on developers, but we cannot reject them. We can, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You will still be billing people.
Correct. And then the question around seaweed and cost to farmers and the impact that has around human waste and taxpayers. Absolutely, we can. If there is a discharge where there is a pollution and we are impacting that product that is used for farmers, we will look to compensate them for that. We'll definitely commit to that. I think they were the sort of, hopefully through the presentation I've answered them. The customer, sorry, I forgot, Councillor Gardner, the customer in question, I would definitely take that detail away. That sounds like a terrible case, so I'll forward it. Thank you very much. Hopefully that has answered the key questions. I'm sure I've missed some, so if I have, I do apologise. Sewage in the sea, sorry, beg pardon. So in terms of, yeah, that was it. So in terms of investment, I think in terms of our previous CEO, what's been committed, there have been improvements in terms of investment. So if you look at Margate and Broadstairs, we've invested £5 million on those assets over the last year, and now they are covered by operators 24/7. So in terms of the operators, that's there for 24/7, so we can look to improve operational and maintenance activities of those assets. And if you look at discharges from our consented sewer outfalls, and to be clear, legal or illegal, our stance is it's unacceptable either way. Okay? But if you look at that year on year, over the last 2 years, that's improved 30% year on year. And we're looking to improve that by a further 50% by 2030. But that will come at a cost, at a tune of about £1 billion for Southern Water. So that is a significant level of investment that's needed. That's going to take time, and there are various activities we need to do in regard to that. So looking at how you stop rainwater getting into sewers, number one. Number two, looking at how we better utilise our network to control flow of rainwater or sewage into our sewer treatment works. And then thirdly, look to expand our infrastructure, i.e. make it bigger to retain that rainwater or sewage to stop any spills. That will take obviously a lot of time and investment to enable.
Doing it years ago.
What about the new developments? Sewage for the new developments. How are you dealing with it?
Could we please not call out from the floor, please? We are trying to listen, and obviously the members of the public who are listening to the filming of this meeting cannot hear any of your voices coming from the back, so it kind of won't make much sense to them if the gentlemen who are speaking have to change their subject in mid-sentence. So if I could just ask you to bear with us. I believe we are getting as fulsome a reply as to most of the issues that we can, but there will always be issues that we feel there hasn't been quite enough information given. But hopefully moving forward, the channels of communication being open, we can keep them open and learn more so that your councillors can be of better help and assistance to all residents. Tim, back to you, please.
So I think the question was around sewage and future developments around sewage. So again, in terms of when we have developments, we look to increase or expand the network or improve on the network as required. In terms of this area, there is quite a bit of work we're doing around understanding and modelling the impact of development, which would lead to, we believe, in the next 2 to 3 years, investment in the sewer network to capture that sewage. Aside the wider investment we're doing for between 2025 and 2030 around growth to expand existing assets or improve existing assets to capture that development usage. Clearly, as I say, we need to work with developers to reduce the amount of rainwater or water entering our sewers. That is absolutely fundamental that we do that and get support from government to work with developers to reduce that entering the sewer as well. I think I heard a question around net profits. I think it's important that we recognise that the water industry, the way we portray P&Ls is pretty complicated. The net profit isn't going to shareholders, it's going to cover debt. In terms of dividends, which is basically the equity injection that goes to shareholders, there hasn't been an equity payout since 2017. And in fact, against the money that we've been afforded by a regulator, I can't detail the exact amount it will be because it's going through commercial conversations with our shareholders at present, but will be likely to be the biggest equity injection in industry ever. So our shareholders are very much trying to invest and improve our investment way beyond what's been afforded by our economic regulator. But when people say net profit or read net profit in the papers, that is not cash going out the door to fund or pay shareholders. That's dividends, and we haven't paid dividends since 2017. That net profit is to cover debt.
Thank you very much. Does that conclude the presentation?
It doesn't. I think I covered the questions. If I haven't, I do apologise. I may have missed
all
some.
right, we'll come back to you during the course of. Could I just ask you to knock the mic off? Thank you very much. I think a major concern is the rate or the pace at which developments are happening, and water. I think I've got the gist of what you're saying. The water supply and removal and so on seems to be lagging behind quite some distance, and I think that's what lay behind the question as to whether or not we can call a halt to these things. I think you've answered from a legal point of view that you can't prevent developers from building, but let's say, if I may just ask, let's say the development has been given planning permission and so on, you've negotiated with the planning authority, the work has begun, and the bricks and mortar and the carports and the drives for the houses are way ahead of water service provision. Is your point of contact at that point the developer, or is it with the planning authority, please?
Yes, you have obviously two stages. At the early onset of development, we work with the local planning authority to give our views as to what's possible and what's not. When a developer has built the bricks and mortars and ready to connect, we work with the developer directly to either enable the connection or do the connection ourselves to that particular property or properties.
Thank you very much. Now going to open this up to our panel, and if I can turn first to Councillor Keane, then Councillor Curry, and then Councillor Huxley, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for coming along tonight. Obviously, this has been very distressing for our residents, and I do appreciate that you were trying to keep people informed via social media and your website and that. But these incidents happened over a number of days, and each time it was a different reason, which you have explained tonight about those different reasons. But one thing that particularly concerned me about this is that, again, there was a failure of the backup systems. And the same thing happened when we had the sewage releases, that backup systems failed. I would have expected, I know it's different systems, I'm not conflating the two, but I would have expected, following those sewage failures, that you as Southern Water would have undertaken a thorough review of all your backup systems, all of them across the whole water supply, to make sure that those incidents couldn't happen again. And that doesn't seem to have happened, and I wonder why that wasn't done, because it's such an important thing to be safeguarding our water supply. I can't understand how you would have a failure and just kind of do a bit of piecemeal repair. And so if it hasn't been done on both systems, the sewage and the drinking water already, can you assure us that there will be an absolutely full review of backup systems to make sure this doesn't happen again? And it does seem to me that what you're talking about, I appreciate all the investment going in now, but didn't you realise that these long-term improvements were needed a long time ago, and, you know, be working towards that? It just seems now we've had some failures that these plans are coming forward. Is this not indicative of systemic long-term underinvestment?
Thank you, Councillor Keane. Tim.
So in terms of the backup systems, before we took the tower out of supply, so the normal mode of operation, we did do investments to make that asset, the pumping station element, more reliable, particularly something called a pressure reducing valve, because it that those pumps could blow up the network. So we installed that to make it more resilient. We actually replaced the generator with a new generator, but it failed. We actually replaced what we call the connectors, but that particular one failed, which we're trying to understand as to why. So we did put safer modes, or we believe would have been safer modes of operation to enable us to do that work, whilst trying to do the right thing of extending that asset, which gives it another 10 years asset life to make it more resilient. There's lots of challenges in Southern Water across, particularly as obviously I'm from the water side. I can't necessarily speak entirely for the waste side. From a water side, there are investments, and there's a lot of activity we need to do to make the whole asset base more reliable. And it's not a quick fix, unfortunately. So if you look at, say, Burham Water Supply Works, which feeds our Kent area, our biggest water supply works in this area, is looking at £100 million of investment to put a lot of those backups in. But it's complex, and it's not something we can do in weeks or months. It's years of activity. In fact, that particular project finishes in 2031, so it's going to take time. So in answer to your question, we are working on it, but it's not completed yet. It's going to take time to do those activities. In terms of the question around the long term and where we've come from and where we've got to go to, if you look back over the last 30 years in the industry, and Southern Water particularly, there have been improvements. So if you look at low pressure, you're 10 times less likely to have a low pressure incident. Supply interruptions, 4 times less likely to have a supply interruption. Leakage is 50% lower than in 2000. If you look at on the waste side, the number of bathing waters that are good or excellent was 27% in 1990, is now at 83%. So there have been improvements. The issue is, and these things take a long time, and we need to go faster. And that's what we're putting in our biggest monetary value into our business plan in between 2025 and 2030 to try and improve it faster. But it's not going to be quick, because these assets across Southern Water and all the water utilities needs a lot of investment to take them into from the Victorian era really to the modern era. So it's just going to take time, I'm afraid. There have been improvements, but it's just, as I say, needs to go faster and harder with the investment plans we put in place.
Thank you very much. Councillor Curry, please. I'm just going to whiz round the committee first, and then please wave at me to make sure I don't forget. Councillor Curry, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. McMahon, for your presentation. After what seems a very long period without any real improvement, it does seem that Southern Water appear to be trying to fix things at last. My original question was partly covered by the presentation. So on the same subject, will these repairs actually fix the problems? And can you guarantee businesses and Thanet residents that these issues are and will be resolved? Thank you.
So as well, in terms of the investment, as you relayed, there's been activity, and we will continue to do that activity for the tower and booster station in question. The risk is definitely reduced. I can say that with confidence. I can't guarantee it will never happen again. But take the pipe burst as an example. That there's about 50 different reasons why a pipe can burst. It's very difficult to understand where and when it will burst. There are not any tools in the industry that can tell you the pipe thickness, and you can put in a pipe and really understand where a pipe might burst for proactive investment. You therefore need to replace lots of pipe, which is very, very expensive. So I can't guarantee. All I can say is the instance that we've had are now markedly reduced by the tower being in supply, the work we've done, and the work that we'll continue to do over the next 6 months at improving the controls to the pumps.
Thank you very much. Councillor Huxley, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Tim, for your presentation. Given that the water industry in the UK was privatised way back in 1989, why have there been multiple wastewater and sewage leaks at Forness pumping station in Thanet since 2017 under Southern Water's ownership? Is this unacceptable situation due to a lack of infrastructure investment by the company over 30 plus years, and the company's culture of prioritising payments to its shareholders up to 2017, rather than actually looking after its customers' needs in the long term? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Huxley.
I mentioned a few figures a minute ago. Reference the improvements since privatisation. I think if you look back in time to the 80s and when privatisation happened, the performance of the water sector, both on the water side and the waste side, was not good. There had been historic really lack of investment, and you can see that in the sort of key figures. So if you take the waste side as an example, only 30% of wastewater was treated properly in the 1980s. And bathing water, say, good or excellent, was at 27%, now at 83%. now 95% of wastewater is treated properly. So there has been lots of improvements, but as I said before, we need to go faster and harder as an industry. Our stance is very, very clear. Any discharge of waste, be it legal or not, is not acceptable. Not acceptable. And we are working very hard to improve it. So, as I said, you know, if you look at the investment over the last year around the Broadstairs and Margate pumping station on waste, £5 million, making them 24/7 covered is a really important piece of work that we've put in place. Our combined sewer outfall task force, we believe, is industry leading. We're doing lots in this space. You've seen, obviously, you would have seen Beach Boy and the openness we're trying to create in the industry of this is what's happening with our assets, being very open and honest and transparent compared to potentially others in the industry is something we really are trying to push. And our Pathfinder work with combined sewer outfalls to try to stop the water entering the sewer is something we're working very hard on. And if you look here in this particular area in question, we're installing a SUD, Sustainable Earned Drainage Scheme, to reduce water entering the sewer. We're working with 10 schools to reduce runoff from roofs that enter the sewer, looking at 2 parks to look at how we can hold water back before it enters the sewer. So we're doing lots of trials and studies to look at the most economic way of resolving these problems in the future. So hopefully that answers your question around it, looking back and what we're trying to do going forward.
Thank you very much. Councillor Yates, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tim, for coming today. Firstly, thank you for apologising. I think it is needed, and like you said, it is not acceptable, and it should have been better. I think we all agree to those statements you made here tonight. So I've got 2 questions. First one's just about accountability. Have any staff actually been reprimanded over what has happened at Broadstairs and what's happened to our residents? You show 4 outages on your presentation tonight, but according to resident information, they've been tracking this. There have been close to 20 outages since 2019. So this isn't a situation that's just been happening in 2022, late 2022, 23. They're recording 2 in 2019, 3 in 2020, 1 in 2021, around 7 in 2022, and this year alone we had about 5. And if there haven't been any reprimands for staff, then surely that just shows that this is business as usual for Southern Water. That's my first question. Second question, would Southern Water be willing to return to this chamber in a year's time to actually show that you are going to come back here and that we will go through the numbers again with you to ensure that we are being held to account? And whilst you answer those 2 questions, I'd just like to return a bit of metal fencing that came off your facilities just over the last week and landed on our beaches. So I'll do that as you answer the question. Thanks.
So in terms of the reprimanded, I think it's important that we understand, you know, the key challenges facing sort of the team and the business with some of the assets and the state of the assets. So and our overall performance. So I guess, has there been anyone who's been impacted? Yes. So the person prior to me in this role, if I'm honest, I've been in the role for 5 months. My role is to improve processes, people, procedures, and all those type of things to improve our performance. I've got a lot of experience in turning around water businesses and improving water businesses. So you could argue my predecessor was not through these events, but through not for various reasons around performance of this is part of. So in answer to your question, yes. It's not the team on the ground. It's my role is to make sure the team on the ground have better tools to better respond and stop these things from happening. Yeah. In terms of 1 year time, absolutely, more than happy to come. It'd be good to time it in with our final determination for our price review, so I can be specific on where we will actually do future mains replacement as an example, which might be more like 15 months time, but we can work around that. Thank you for the fence line. I did see that on Twitter earlier on, the fence. We need to understand what happened there. Again, apologies for that, and thank you to the customers who alerted us to that. The fence has been fixed, but we need to understand why that occurred, because that shouldn't have occurred for such a solid piece of apparatus. So we need to understand that, and we'll clearly investigate that and feed that back once we know more.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councillor Smith, please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Mr McMahon. I commend your bravery in being here and your grace under pressure. I have two questions. One is, it's harking back to the question about your ability to comment on planning applications for large housing developments. I've seen what is published with the planning applications, and I could be paraphrasing, but I think it says, "It's all right, we promise, tick." And what I actually want to ask you is whether there is no way of making any kind of comment about the consequences of adding 21,400 new homes in Thanet between now and 2040 on your ability to supply reliable drinking water and to not despoil our coastal waters. And the other question was, given that Southern Water supplies an essential, life-saving resource, on a monopoly basis, what possible recourse do residents, businesses, or local government have if you fail in your corporate duty? That's it.
Microphone, please, Tim.
Sorry, thank you, Chairman. I think in terms of the 21,400 properties, we'll definitely take it away just to sort of confirm that we are supporting it or not. I think in terms of the comment, we can comment on it. We can't reject or approve it, but we can, as you say what we need and what the conditions are, but we need to get it up as early as we can in the process. So I need to go away and check and confirm with the team as to, are we being as firm as we should be around the constraints that we have on our system and network. In terms of the impact or the recourse that we feel if we fail on our duty, to your question, there's lots of sort of factors that get played into it from our regulator, but the principal activity, if we fail on particular performance measures, so that for water would be leakage, or the example we saw here around supply interruptions of customer supply, on waste would be pollutions, or sewage treatment work compliance, are impacted through us by something called outcome delivery incentives. So they are the reward and penalties the economic regulator enforces upon us. So if we do a good job, you get a small reward. If you do badly, you get a penalty. And we are very much in that penalty threshold. The regulator has set a very, very stretching target upon the industry for this price review for 2020 to 2025. And from day one, everyone had to achieve that, what is an upper quartile performance company across the board, which for Southern Water, for context, is in some areas is a 10-fold improvement in performance. And if we don't do that, we incur penalties. So for this incident, as an example, you saw the number of circa £600,000 on the GSS costs. It actually cost us probably to the tune of £5 million in terms of the penalties we incurred, obviously the emergency costs we had to put in place, water tankers or bottled water, and the GSS costs. So we see impacts from that, And if we are seen not to perform in the way that our licence condition requires, the regulator has a responsibility to come in and force something called a Section 19 undertaking, which is where we have to commit to various plans to improve performance. Happens relatively rarely in the industry, but Southern Water are a year away from completing our one around wastewater, which is obviously well known. We've actually completed 98% of our actions. The last one is around the final trains of investment over the next year. So there is a piece where the regulators, if they see that we are not fulfilling our duties, they can come and enforce that through something called a Section 19 undertaking.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rozecki, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. McMahon. First for coming tonight and putting up with our questions, and hopefully we'll see you next year for another round. My question comes in regarding the Forness and the Northforeland pumps. I believe they were designed initially to operate for about 6 hours at a time, and working with the tide to take away any effluent, etc. From my understanding from the Thanet fishermen, these pumps have been operating up to 24 hours a day, well outside their design limits. And due to this now, the fish in that area, out to the 3-mile limit, are now almost non-existent. They put it down to what's been happening with these pumps and what's been discharged. They would like further engagement with yourselves. They have spoken to you, I believe, but they would like further engagement. And I would hope that this time next year when we sit here, I can come back and say thanks very much for your engagement with the fishermen. Thank you.
I can't comment on that exact pumping arrangement, etc., but we'll take that away and come back to you in writing as to what our views of that and what we can do if there is a particular problem there.
Thank you. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tim. I wanted to go into a little bit more detail on what you just said about what we can do. Thinking about how Southern Water engages with our planning department and our planning committee, and what exactly, you've said what you are required by law to do, and you've said about that sort of level of engagement. I'm interested in knowing, does that happen routinely every time there's a major development? Does it happen, are you invited to comment every time that when they build 10 houses at the top of my street, like they've just done and covered the whole thing in block paving, and there's no drainage and it used to be a field, etc. What level of engagement do you have, and how far are you able to comment and say, well, actually, if this developer put in soakaways, it'd be a hell of a lot better for us, or those kinds of things? Just those nitty-gritty practicalities.
Obviously, the bigger developments, or the larger developments, it's easier to illustrate the impacts that has because of the volume of water that might come in to be needed or that might enter our system. And usually that has a lot more engagement at the earlier start of the process, so we can influence through the local plan. Are you invited to do that by our... Yeah, obviously it varies from sort of council to council, but in the main for this area it's good, it's really good. So we are invited. In terms of the more sort of smaller development, it can be harder to sort of influence that as part of the housing plan. But we do get invited to do that, but it's harder to sort of illustrate the impacts for it. And then, as I say, if that development gets approved, we cannot reject it. We have to support that development through the investment we need to put in place.
But you can advise quite strongly that there's really going to be a problem if we don't do that.
Indeed, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Boyd, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tim and John, for coming. Welcome to lovely Margate. I hope you've enjoyed your visit somewhat. I've got two questions. The first one is, are the improvements plans that you keep referencing based on current figures of households or future increases of households? Do they also take into account the resilience needed due to adverse weather caused by climate change that we've seen in recent years? So how far forward have you been planning in terms of your improvements? Because they might be all right for now, but if they're not sustainable or resilient for later. So that's the first question. Do you want to answer that first, or do you want me to go straight in with the second? Cool. The second one is, do you look at Thanet as a whole for land in which rainwater can easily be absorbed in liaison with planning? So looking at the local plan. And also in relation to that, are there geographical comparisons in other areas in terms of the ratio of density of built-up areas to undeveloped land? So when you're looking at Thanet as a district, can you compare it to other districts to see what is the ratio of how much built-up land there is to how much porous land that actually is required? Because as you said earlier, one of the best ways to avoid the overwhelming amount of sewage is to stop the rainwater going in. So that's my second question. Thank you.
So in terms of water and waste work slightly differently in terms of planning approaches. Obviously, I can answer water slightly more strongly than waste. So water, we work to an 80-year projection around growth and climate change. And that is why we are looking at water recycling or desalination plants, looking at pipe work all the way from the northern England all the way through the Severn, the Thames to Hampshire, and then pumping it eastward. So that's something called the Water Resource Management Plan that gets issued in the summer of this year. So that is very much part of our plans and future projections for population growth and climate change. And that's quite severe in the future for the southeast, which is, you know, scarce of water, drier than Istanbul. So that is something that we invest a lot of time and effort in as an industry. And there's coming to a point now where there's some quite challenging decisions to be made with significant investment requirements that may or may not be delivered through Southern Water. There might be other routes that happens. So in terms of our, particularly for the bigger growth items, the 20-odd thousand properties, that goes into our growth plan that then feeds our water resource management plan that then feeds our decision making around what's needed, particularly around the bigger infrastructure. I guess the question around how we do when it comes to waste, and do waste. So we've just created something called the Drainage Waste Management Plans on waste, which is trying to conjure up the same approach as the water side, so the WRMP. So that's the first time we're submitting these plans, which is all about looking at growth horizons and trying to invest in the network ahead of the need, ahead of growth, as opposed to a developer coming in doing it almost retrospectively. So you do it the bigger investment ahead of need, and we are looking to put in a big growth investment plan as part of our combined sewer outfall programme to look at how we reduce water entering sewers, but also expand our sewage treatment works to deal with increased flow that might happen through flash flooding or through future growth. So that's the sort of similar approach that we're feeding into our regulator. With all these things, this is why the final determination, our price review with our regulator is so important, because we will submit a plan which we believe is the right thing for performance and risk and customers' bills. But it's a big challenge for us going forward because the demands our customers are rightly setting for all the things we've been talking about cost money. And we've got a task with the water companies and the regulators to try and get that right balance, so it's affordable for customers, but doing the right thing for the long and the short term. So that will have to go through this process over the next year, which may or may not lead to the right outcome for what we think is right for customers. It might mean other work we need to do with our regulators. In terms of your question around Thanet as a whole, how do we work out the modelling and the sort of the size of the pipes and what the inundation or infiltration of water could be? The approach we use for both water and waste is we will look to model the system to understand how much flow is in the sewers or how much flow is going through our water pipes. Sometimes we need to build hydraulic models to do that. Sometimes that needs investigations and sewer level monitors put into the network to understand what's happening. And from that we're able to articulate whether we can deal with future growth in that area by running different scenarios through it. I'm not sure I fully answered your question around the sort of permeable, impermeable, because I'd have to take that away. But if you have a, it kind of, where we do hydraulic modelling, particularly on waste, which that particular question impacts, if you're getting lots of infiltration into the network, that's captured in your hydraulic model, so you can then run scenarios of future growth on there. So if you get more water entering the sewer or sewage entering the sewer, you can run that from today's state of play. So the fact that Thanet might be more have more impermeable surface than other areas kind of doesn't really matter for the way we do the hydraulic modelling, because it takes the state of play today and then you build on top of that. Clearly what we need to do is work with developers and drive better legislation to ensure that there isn't runoff into sewers. We have permeable driveways, we have water butts to collect sewage, to collect rainwater. We stop the right that highway drainage can connect into sewers, shouldn't be allowed. So there's things like that we should do to stop that from happening in totality. But I'll probably need to write to you just to sort of confirm the process a little bit more, because it's quite complicated. But fundamentally, we have a view of what's entering the sewer today, and then we build and projections off it based on future growth. And that is the way that we can sort of articulate and confirm whether we can account for that future growth in the future. So it doesn't really matter in terms of the current permeable, impermeable surfaces that we've got today, because we model how it works today.
Thank you very much. Members, I'm going to go to Councillor Towning, and then I'm going to wrap up by asking Councillor Keane if she would come back with her supplementary. Just by way of your information, we have been on this subject now. It's a huge subject, I know, but we have been on it for an hour and a quarter. I am conscious that these two gentlemen may have journeys to make, and so I think I would really like to wrap it up after Councillor Towning and then Councillor Keane, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation. We went through the fact that we've got a lot of upset people over here, as I'm sure you appreciate, of all the errors that have occurred in recent months. My interest is the vast amount of new developments that are taking place now and in the future. Now, I do know from my dealings with Southern Water that you're involved in surface water controls in Deal and in Whitstable. Well, obviously, those are in new developments in those areas. What are you proposing, or when are you proposing to bring that type of situation to us over here in Margate to control that? Because I know that surface water is a big problem. It floods the system, and that creates discharges, and that's a fact of life. And that's something that you're desperate to control. And as we've been having discharges here, surely these new water butts that I have talked with Southern Water about, where there are two chambers, and one chamber fills up and the bottom chamber disperses the water on a gradual basis, which I think is a great idea. So, I think that's something that we over here would like to know when that sort of system is going to be put in place for all our developments in Margate. And finally, I'd just like to say I thank Southern Water for their support. They have given a local volunteer group in my ward for beach cleaning through the winter and litter picking, and I'm grateful for that. And I hope that you guys will continue to support us in keeping the beaches clean throughout the year. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question. In terms of stopping surface water entering the sewer and what are we doing in that space, the first was we welcome the government's likely change to policy where all developers need to have a sustainable earners drainage scheme in place for them to have the right to connect. That is hopefully going to be legislation in 2024, if not earlier, and that will therefore drive a step change into those types of solutions that will answer that point. That aside, through the works and trials we're doing across the whole of the Southern Water Patch in different geographies and sort of urban, rural areas, the reason why we're doing those trials is to understand what is the most economic way to address water ingress into our sewers. And from that will form our plans for the next 5 years. And the because that say can be a large price tag required to sort of reduce discharges for our outfalls. But the way we're trying to do it is to make sure we're looking at the most cost and most economical way of doing that to protect customers and stopping these big bill shocks that could come if you went for a solution of big civil infrastructure, so big tanks basically, which will cost a fortune, looking at different ways to stop it even entering the sewer through sustainable urban drainage. Some of the examples I alluded to earlier on with some of the trials we're doing here around schools as an example are paramount to that. In terms of cleaning the beaches, yes, we'll continue to protect that and support that. Clearly, we don't want it to happen at all. That's the key aim for us. But as I say, that's going to take time. But in terms of our commitment to support our beaches, yes, we'll continue with that.
Thank you very much. Councillor Keenan, please, if you'd like to come back.
Thank you. You've obviously given us a lot of information tonight, so we'll have to sort of go and work our way through that. One thing I just wanted to really pin you down on, though, has there been a root and branch review of the emergency measures? And I know you can't sort of promise that there'll never be any incidents again, but have you done everything? Is everything in place to prevent these in future? Thank you.
Can I just clarify the question, if I may? So when we say emergency measures, do you mean if we do have a failure, how we respond, or to stopping them from happening completely, or how we respond?
It's to stop it happening completely, that, you know, the generators you've got are going to perform, whatever other backup measures you've got in place are working as they should.
So in terms of Rumsfield's tower, I have to say having the tower in is good news because it gives us that 6-hour storage. Over the next 6 months, we will improve that booster station to enable us to deal with these power fluctuations we've seen. There is some other work we're doing around a particular valve, what one can use to get water in if we do lose both supplies as well, that we're trying to enhance. So I'm confident with those things, the risk will reduce. I can't say we'll guarantee it because pipes, as I said before, any pipe can burst. It's very difficult until we do the significant mains replacement programme that we want to do between 2025 and 2030. Final determination aside, I can't guarantee we'll be able to stop it from happening, but I can definitely assure you that the risk will reduce from what you've seen historically. I think it's important in terms of the emergency measures we have in place. Some of the investments we've done in this place in Southern Water over the last 2 years to improve our response are quite marked from where they were. So we can now supply water tankers. We have our own fleet of 6. So in the Rumsfield event of December, we used 12. Our bottled water response is much stronger than what we've had historically, and we can do up to 4 times the amount of vulnerable. We can supply up to 4 times the amount of vulnerable customers than we could have done 9 months ago through new contracts we have in place. We've changed our whole event procedures to better manage these events and respond better through better governance and controls, and working with our local resilience forums to understand where improving those relationships so we can respond better in events through joint ventures and joint conversations than maybe what have happened in the past. So we try to do two parts. Obviously, stop it from happening is key, but if it does happen, we have made massive changes to our operation to better respond if need be. And you know, that will continuously improve. We review every big event to understand how we can enhance our service going forward. And it still needs to get, obviously needs to get better, and it will get better every time we learn from these incidents.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been a very interesting hour and 20 minutes. Thank you very much for your input. I know it's a very difficult subject and not everybody will be 100% happy with things as they stand at the moment, but hopefully we have something that a better understanding at the very least of some of the difficulties you face. I should have said at the beginning, Tim McMahon, you are the Director of Water Operations. I'll say so now for the benefit of those listening on the recording. And John Mealy, you are the Stakeholder Engagement Manager. Thank you very much both for coming, by your presence here, which was, as I say again, an invitation. Southern Water have shown a willingness not only to speak with council, but also to speak with residents and members of the public, as shown by your 2 meetings today. And we look forward to this kind of communication continuing. I hesitate to use the word consultation, but consulting with the public, continuing on into the future for everyone's benefit. Thank you very much for all that you have shared with us this evening. To the panel now, if I may, we have 2 options. One is, as a result of the presentations and the question and answer session, to, as a panel, not take any further action at this time, or as a panel to make a recommendation or 2 that Cabinet may wish to consider. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would like to invite Southern Water back in a year's time and to see how the repairs have gone, see how the improvements have gone, and to talk to councillors and residents once more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And am I right in thinking we would do that through the leader, the CEO, or appointed officer?
Well, it's effectively a recommendation
From
from
the
this
panel.
panel to the new panel.
To the new panel, not
But-
to
but-
Cabinet.
No.
Okay.
That's just us.
Forgive my error, it's a recommendation to the next panel, not to the Cabinet. Any further recommendations? I think that was covered quite well, and thank you for formalising that. We will do that, make a recommendation that you come back and share with us some more progress and hopes for the future. In the meanwhile, though, thank you very much. I'm now going to take a recess and close the meeting for a few moments to give you time to gather up and to leave. And to the members of the public who may wish to leave the meeting at this point, do please do so. And thank you very much for attending and joining with us on this very important issue. Okay, I'd like now to reconvene the meeting. Thank you to those who've taken part thus far. We're now moving to agenda item number 5, the TDC and Parish Town Council's Collaboration Working Party report. Before I ask Councillor Curry to come and present his report to us, I'd like to invite Councillor Hudson from Birchington Parish Council, he's the chairman of that council, to say a few words. You'd like to speak on this item. Councillor Hudson, please.
Good evening, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I represent Birchington Parish. The parish and the town councils are in fact the first tier of local government, but then you understand that because you are working in local government and we have similar objectives. The problem with our tier is quite often we don't have good contacts with the tier above us, i.e. in this case Thanet District Council. We've had a period of the last 4 years or so when I appreciate things have been difficult for Thanet Council, but contact and communication between the parishes and officers of the district haven't always been good. I welcome the report from the working party that's before you this evening, and I implore you to accept their recommendations. We have had consultations with them during the course of their work, and the recommendations they're putting forward to you are absolutely solid. I can tell you, because I do work with the Kent Association of Local Councils, many of the districts and boroughs throughout Kent do actually have these things in place, where they have regular contact with the parishes, with the parish councils, the officers of the parishes, and things work a lot better. And I would hope that if you accept the recommendations of the working group, that things will be better here in Thanet. And it's two-way communications. We can offer sometimes things for Thanet to do, for the residents. They're all your residents as well. And by sharing some of the workload, it is to advantage. Chairman, you've had a long meeting. I won't keep you any longer, but I'll be polite. And please support the recommendations in full. Thank you.
Councillor Hudson, thank you very, very much for coming to speak to us. I'm now going to change my glasses. I'm now going to, first of all, invite Councillor Curry to come and sit this side to talk to us. Ooh. I'm going to break with tradition here, but really I think it's going to be easier for... It's going to be easier for Councillor Curry to actually look at you while he's talking and not have to turn his head all the time. So thank you for that. Welcome to the top table.
Feels pretty good.
I don't know. I might not be here for much longer, so who knows? But thank you very much for coming, and I'd like you to take us through your report in your own time and your own way, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I hope members have had time to look at the report. I mean, we've made 9 recommendations. We didn't want to recommend too many. We thought quality, not quantity. So, without further ado, firstly, I'd like to thank my fellow Working Party group members, Councillor Austin, Councillor Bailey and Councillor Fellows, who, along with myself as Chair, made up the TDC and Parish Town Council Collaboration Working Party. Thank you also to Parish and Town Council representatives, Cabinet members and senior officers who attended the various sessions where the Working Party gathered evidence that was used to come up with this report. It has been a really interesting exercise. I think we all enjoyed it. It was quite an eye-opener, especially for someone who's in Margate, and we're trying to get a Margate Town Council, hearing people that actually are on the front line, and there was an awful lot of agreement as well among everybody who attended the meetings. So it has been a really interesting exercise for us as councillors to get an insight into what parish and district councillors as well as officers think about how we can improve effective working between the district and parishes. A number of ideas have been identified in this report, many of which were proposed by all parties. If implemented, we feel this would successfully lead to a more effective approach for collaborative working for the benefit of our residents around the district. I would also like to thank TDC officers, especially Charles and Nick, for their input to support this review, for their invaluable help in putting this report together. Also Democratic Services as well. I know the team has really helped out here. With the ever-tightening of budgets year on year, we feel that if the recommendations can be implemented, this will hopefully make a big difference to how services are delivered for our local communities. After considering the report, we hope members will adopt the recommendations to Cabinet for their consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Members, any comments to make about reports? Councillor Fellows, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Councillor Hudson and Miss Bevan, who's my clerk and my chairman from Birchington, to come along this evening. So firstly, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues who I worked with putting the review together, especially Councillor Curry, who chaired, and Nick and Charles, who facilitated everything. I think when we first met, sitting there with a blank piece of paper in front of us, we didn't know where he was going to lead us. But I believe we ended up with a great document with some great recommendations, and I hope whoever's in the front benches after May can take the opportunity to take these recommendations forward. We are a cross-party group, and I hope there's cross-party cooperation in the implementation of the recommendations. I think the spirit and direction of the review is excellent. I don't think we have our town and parish clerks and chairs to who gave us their thoughts to put this paper together to thank for that. We're encouraged that the town and parish councils are willing to get stuck in and take on more tasks in their areas. But this has to come with some support as well, be it financial or administratively. I think it's time to give our town and parish councils more autonomy that they so long for as well. And I hope that Margate can get their town council soon. I think the review could also lead to more clarity for residents who also like to know who does what in our district. And this could also lead to further recommendations coming forward. It should only lead to making our areas better for our residents. And I'd just like to say, because I've been involved with both of the reviews this year, one actually led on to the other one. And I hope after the elections and going forward that we can do more cross-party reviews. I think Thanet would be a better place if we work more cross-party collaboratively. Thanks.
Much. Councillor Yates, please.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, and amazing report. I just wanted to ask a quick question on recommendation 1. This parish forum, just for clarity, I think I know the answer, but does that include the Margate Charter Trustees then until such time as they have a town council? So that parish forum, will there be any involvement with the clerk there in that? Thanks.
I'm not absolutely sure whether the Margate Charter Trustees are involved.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
Because they haven't been held for a while.
Yeah, we did used to invite them.
Okay. Yeah, so Margate Charter Trustees will definitely be invited.
Great stuff,
along.
thanks.
Yeah.
Members, any other comments about the report as we have it? Recommendation number 9, if I can just mention that one, share an up-to-date TDC officer and member structure chart with contact details that can be shared with parish and town councils. I assume that is designed to stay within the elected members and the officers of those councils, and it's not something that would then be just made public. We do need to protect council officers to a degree. So I just had a little question about number 9. Members, we have this opportunity to accept this report in full for ourselves and send on then those recommendations to Cabinet. I did note there is a possibility that it might be considered by Cabinet on the 16th, but if that's too tight, it would be the next one. I'm not sure exactly when it will be. It'll likely to be the next one. But then perhaps I could invite you to propose that we forward all the recommendations, that we accept them and forward them to Council.
I could Chair, I propose that we forward all the recommendations to Cabinet.
Thank you. And could I have a seconder, please? Councillor King, thank you very much. Do members agree? Agreed. Thank you very much for producing the report for us, all of you for your hard work in putting that together. It's a very thorough report.
Thank you, members.
And our thanks also to, for the benefit of the recording, to the members of the town and parish councils who were involved as well, their officers and representatives. Thank you very much. We move then on to our next agenda item, which is the review of our overview and scrutiny panel work programme. Do members have any recommendations they'd like to make about our programme as it stands? Okay, thank you for that. And the final item on the agenda is the forward plan and exempt cabinet report list. Are there any comments that members wish to make about that? No, then it only remains for me to thank everybody for coming and taking part in the meeting this evening, a very informative meeting, and I thank you for taking part and contributing in the way you have done. That concludes the business